You wake up every morning carrying the weight of unspoken words. Words you swallowed to keep the peace. Words you twisted to fit into conversations where you didn't belong. You've become an expert at reading rooms, adjusting your voice, your posture, even your opinions, all to earn a nod of approval from people whose respect you're not even sure you want. And you're exhausted from it. But somewhere deep inside, you remember what it felt like to speak and have the room go quiet. Not from fear, but from respect. You remember moments when your presence alone shifted the energy, when your silence carried more weight than others' endless chatter. You remember when you didn't need to explain yourself, because your certainty spoke first. That version of you isn't gone. It's buried under years of conditioning that taught you to shrink, to apologize, to seek permission for the space you already occupy. Today, I'm going to show you how to reclaim what was always yours, not through louder words or desperate gestures, but through the ancient art of dangerous confidence. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself because it transforms everything it touches. The kind that makes people lean in when you speak, not because you demand attention, but because you command it. This isn't about becoming someone new. This is about remembering who you were before the world convinced you to become small, before you learned to beg for what should be freely given, before you traded your throne for a seat at someone else's table. The path I'm about to reveal will make you uncomfortable. It will challenge every instinct you've developed to blend in, to please, to apologize for your own existence. But on the other side of this discomfort lies something far more valuable than temporary approval. On the other side lies the unshakable confidence that comes from knowing your own worth, and never again needing anyone else to confirm it. If you're ready to stop being a servant in your own life and finally claim your inner throne, then subscribe now, because this journey requires commitment. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why the most dangerous person in any room is the one who no longer needs it to validate who they are. Number 1, the price of hesitation. You know that moment when opportunity knocks and you freeze. Your mind floods with 1,000 reasons why you're not ready, why someone else deserves it more, why you should wait until you're perfect. And while you're drowning in your own thoughts, paralyzed by the fear of making the wrong choice, someone else walks through that door. Someone less qualified, less prepared, but infinitely more decisive. This is the silent tragedy that plays out in countless lives every single day. Men who possess brilliance but lack the conviction to wield it. Men who have wisdom but surrender their throne to those who simply refuse to hesitate. The world operates on a brutal but simple principle. It doesn't reward the most talented. It doesn't crown the most deserving. It bows to those who act with unshakable certainty, even when that certainty is built on less foundation than your doubt. Picture a general standing before 2 armies. One army is filled with the finest warriors, trained for years, equipped with superior weapons, but led by a commander who questions every decision. The other army is smaller, less experienced, but follows a leader who points forward and never looks back. History tells us which army wins. History always tells us which army wins. I once knew a merchant who possessed maps to the richest trade routes, knowledge passed down through generations. But he spent months analyzing weather patterns, calculating risks, seeking counsel from every sage in the kingdom. While he deliberated, a younger merchant with inferior maps and half the knowledge set sail. When my careful friend finally departed, he found markets already claimed, relationships already forged, fortunes already made. The hesitant man believes he's being wise, but he's actually surrendering his power to time itself. Every moment of hesitation is a vote of no confidence in your own capability. Every pause to second-guess yourself is permission for life to pass you by. Confidence is not a gift bestowed upon the lucky few. It's not talent, it's not bloodline, it's not fortune. Confidence is an identity you construct, brick by brick, decision by decision. It's the accumulated weight of choosing action over analysis, commitment over comfort, presence over perfection. The man who hesitates believes the world owes him time to prepare, but the world owes you nothing except the consequences of your choices, and choosing not to choose is still a choice. It's choosing to let others write your story while you perfect the first sentence. Stop waiting for permission that will never come. Stop seeking guarantees in a world built on uncertainty. The price of hesitation is not just the opportunities you miss, it's the man you never become. While you're preparing to live, life is already deciding who deserves its gifts. Number 2, the inner servant versus the sovereign. There lives within you two men engaged in an eternal war. One is a servant, trained from childhood to bow, to please, to apologize for his very existence. The other is a sovereign, born to rule, to decide, to command respect through the sheer force of his presence. Most men never realize this war is raging. They mistake the servant's whisper for their own voice. This servant was not born with you. He was crafted by 1,000 small surrenders, shaped by every time you swallowed your truth to avoid conflict, molded by each moment you chose acceptance over authenticity. Society needed this servant. It taught you to seek approval before seeking purpose, to ask permission before taking space, to apologize before asserting. The servant whispers constantly. He tells you to lower your voice so others feel comfortable. He convinces you to shrink your ambitions so others don't feel small. He makes you believe that your worth is determined by external validation, that your value fluctuates with others' moods, that your identity belongs not to you, but to whoever happens to be watching. Imagine a king who spends his days in the servants' quarters, polishing shoes and begging for scraps from his own table. This is the tragedy of the modern man. He possesses a throne but sleeps on the floor. He owns a kingdom but lives as a beggar. He has sovereign power but exercises it only in the service of others' comfort. I remember watching a man enter my court, a trader who had accumulated great wealth. Yet when he spoke, every sentence ended like a question. When he walked, his shoulders curved inward as if apologizing for the space he occupied. His gold could not mask the poverty of his spirit. He had riches but remained a servant to every opinion, every glance, every whispered judgment. The servant's greatest trick is convincing you that his voice is humility, that his submission is wisdom, that his smallness is virtue. But there is nothing virtuous about abandoning the throne you were born to occupy. There is nothing humble about denying the gifts you were given to share with the world. The sovereign does not seek permission to exist. He does not apologize for his strength. He does not dim his light so others can feel bright. The sovereign understands that the world needs his leadership, his vision, his unapologetic commitment to excellence. This transformation from servant to sovereign is not a gentle process. It requires you to disappoint people who have grown comfortable with your submission. It demands you to stand firm when everything in you has been trained to bend. It means choosing your own approval over the fleeting comfort of others' temporary satisfaction. The servant will fight for his survival. He will whisper that you're being selfish, arrogant, inconsiderate. He will remind you of every time assertiveness was punished, every moment strength was criticized. But remember this: the servant's survival depends on your sovereignty's death. You cannot serve two masters. You cannot bow to others while ruling yourself. The time has come to choose which voice will guide your life. Will you remain a servant in your own kingdom, or will you finally claim the throne that has been waiting for you all along? Number 3, inversion as a practical rule. Your instincts are lying to you. Every impulse that feels safe, every reaction that seems natural, every response that appears reasonable has been programmed by the very system that keeps you small. The path to sovereignty runs directly opposite to everything your conditioning tells you to do. This is the great inversion, the fundamental rule that separates those who rule from those who remain ruled. When fear whispers shrink, you expand. When shame demands you justify, you remain silent. When guilt insists you apologize, you confront. Each inversion is a declaration of independence from the tyranny of your own servitude. The servant's impulses always lead in the same direction, towards smallness, towards safety, towards the familiar prison of others' approval. But the sovereign operates by a different compass entirely. Where the servant sees danger, the sovereign sees opportunity. Where the servant feels the need to explain, the sovereign lets his actions speak. Where the servant rushes to smooth over conflict, the sovereign allows tension to reveal truth. Consider the lion who has been caged since birth. When the cage door opens, his first instinct is to remain inside. The familiar bars feel safer than the vast unknown. But freedom requires him to move against that instinct, to step into the space that once terrified him, to claim the territory that is rightfully his. There was a time when a rival merchant challenged my decisions before my entire council. Every fiber of my being, trained by years of diplomatic courtesy, urged me to explain my reasoning, to justify my choices, to win him over through persuasion. Instead, I did the opposite. I looked at him in complete silence until the weight of that silence filled the room. Then I simply said, "The decision stands," and moved to the next matter. He never challenged me again, and more importantly, no one else did either. The inversion is not cruelty, it's clarity. It's not aggression, it's authenticity. When you feel the familiar urge to make yourself smaller, that is precisely the moment to expand. Not through loud declarations or dramatic gestures, but through the quiet, unmistakable claiming of your rightful space. When someone questions your judgment and you feel that desperate need to prove yourself, that is exactly when you remain silent. Let your track record speak. Let your results argue. Let your consistency demonstrate what your words could never convince. When you make a mistake and every cell in your body screams to apologize profusely, to grovel for forgiveness, to promise it will never happen again, that is when you simply acknowledge, correct, and move forward. The sovereign takes responsibility without surrendering dignity. Each successful inversion weakens the servant's grip on your identity. Each time you choose expansion over contraction, silence over explanation, confrontation over capitulation, you train your spirit to recognize its true nature. You teach yourself that the impulses designed to keep you safe are the very forces keeping you caged. The path is uncomfortable because it demands you act against everything that feels natural. But what feels natural to a caged lion is not natural to a free one. What feels safe to a servant is not safe for a sovereign. Your new instincts must be earned through practice, through choice, through the daily decision to invert the programming that has governed your life. This is your revolution, fought not in the streets but in the countless moments when you choose sovereignty over servitude, expansion over contraction, presence over apology. Number 4, presence before voice. Before you ever open your mouth, the room has already decided who you are. Your authority is established not by your words but by the way you occupy space, the weight of your gaze, the deliberate nature of your movements. The sovereign understands that presence precedes voice. That power is communicated through the body long before it's expressed through speech. Watch a man enter a room and you can immediately distinguish the ruler from the ruled. The ruler moves with purpose but never haste. His shoulders carry the confidence of someone who belongs wherever he chooses to be. His gaze meets others directly, not seeking approval but offering recognition. He takes his time because time bends to his rhythm, not the reverse. The servant, by contrast, apologizes for his presence before he even speaks. His eyes dart around seeking permission to exist in the space. His movements are hurried, as if he's late for an appointment he was never invited to. His posture curves inward, making himself smaller, less threatening, less noticeable. This is the language the body speaks that no words can override. You can speak with the authority of kings, but if your body whispers servitude, Servitude is what others will hear. You can claim confidence with your voice, but if your presence radiates uncertainty, uncertainty is what others will feel. Think of the mountain that stands silent against the storm. It doesn't argue with the wind or negotiate with the rain. Its presence alone commands respect. Its stillness speaks louder than any thunder. Its calm endurance in the face of chaos demonstrates a power that needs no announcement. I once received an emissary from a distant kingdom, a young man tasked with delivering terms of trade. He rushed into my court, speaking quickly, gesturing frantically, filling every silence with nervous words. His message was intelligent, his terms were fair, but his presence undermined every word he spoke. Contrast this with his older companion, who said almost nothing but stood with such quiet authority that when he finally spoke, the entire room leaned forward to listen. Presence is cultivated through intentionality. Every movement becomes a choice rather than a reaction. When you walk with destination, not desperation. When you sit, you settle rather than collapse. When you stand, you rise rather than unfold. Your gaze becomes a tool of sovereignty, not the aggressive stare of insecurity trying to intimidate, but the calm, steady look of someone who has nothing to prove and nothing to hide. Your eyes meet others not to challenge but to acknowledge, not to dominate but to recognize. Silence becomes your greatest weapon. While others fill empty air with nervous chatter, you allow silence to work on your behalf. Silence creates space for others to reveal themselves. Silence forces depth in conversation. Silence makes your eventual words carry the weight of consideration, rather than the emptiness of compulsion. The sovereign is never in a hurry because hurry suggests desperation, and desperation betrays weakness. You move through the world like someone who knows that what is meant for you will not pass by you, and what passes by was never truly yours. Your presence becomes so commanding that when you finally do speak, your words carry the full weight of the authority you've already established. But by then, half the battle is already won. The room has already decided to listen before you've given them reason to hear. Master your presence, and you master the first and most fundamental language of power. Number 5, the voice that decides. When the sovereign speaks, he does not offer opinions, he issues decrees. His words carry the weight of finality, the authority of someone who has already considered all angles and reached a conclusion. The difference between a voice that suggests and a voice that decides is the difference between requesting permission and granting it. Listen to how most men speak and you'll hear the language of uncertainty disguised as conversation. I think maybe we should. I'm not sure, but perhaps. It might make sense if we could. Every sentence hedged with doubt, every statement weakened by qualification, every word apologizing for its own existence. The servant's vocabulary is built on escape routes. He speaks in maybes and possibilities because he fears the commitment of certainty. He qualifies every statement because he's terrified of being wrong. He seeks consensus because he's afraid to stand alone in his convictions. But the sovereign speaks a different language entirely. When he says, "We will do this," there is no question mark hiding in his tone. When he makes a decision, he doesn't poll the room for validation. When he sets a direction, he doesn't apologize for the destination. Your voice is the external expression of your internal authority. A low, steady tone communicates control. Measured pace demonstrates thoughtfulness. Strategic pauses create weight and expectation. The sovereign never speaks quickly because he is never desperate to be heard. He knows that what he has to say will be worth the wait. I remember a moment when my advisors presented me with a complex trade dispute, each offering different solutions, their voices rising in urgency and volume as they competed for my attention. When they finished, I waited. The silence stretched until they began to shift uncomfortably. Then I spoke, my voice lower than theirs had been, slower than their rapid exchanges. "We will honor the original agreement and compensate the injured party." no explanation, no justification, no invitation for debate. The matter was settled because my voice had settled it. Eliminate the verbal weeds that strangle your authority. I think becomes I know or is omitted entirely. Maybe we should becomes we will. I'm not sure if this makes sense becomes here's what we're going to do. Each eliminated qualifier is a small victory over the servant within you. Your tone must match your content. You cannot speak of certainty with uncertainty in your voice. You cannot claim authority while your vocal cords betray doubt. The sovereign's voice emerges from deep within his chest, grounded in the certainty of his convictions, steady as the foundation upon which he stands. But remember, the power is not in volume. Shouting is the domain of those who doubt their own authority. The sovereign speaks quietly because he knows others will strain to hear wisdom. He speaks slowly because he knows his words will be considered carefully. He speaks little because he knows scarcity increases value. When others challenge your decisions, you don't raise your voice, you lower it. When they question your judgment, you don't speed up your explanations, you slow them down. When they pressure you for immediate answers, you take more time, not less. Your voice becomes a tool of transformation, not just for others but for yourself. Each time you speak with authority, you reinforce your own identity as one who possesses it. Each decisive statement strengthens the sovereign within you. Each word spoken with conviction builds the foundation for the next. Speak as one who decides, and the world will treat you as one who has the right to make those decisions. Number 6, the power of silence in non-debate. The moment you begin to defend yourself, you have already lost. Defense implies guilt, justification suggests error, explanation reveals weakness. The sovereign operates by a different rule. He corrects if necessary, states his position if required, but never, ever defends his right to hold it. This is perhaps the most difficult principle for the recovering servant to grasp. His entire existence has been built on explaining himself, on winning others over through the power of his reasoning, on earning his place at the table through the merit of his arguments. But the sovereign's power lies not in his ability to convince, but in his refusal to be drawn into battles beneath his station. When someone challenges your decision, your conditioning screams at you to justify it. Your servant's mind floods with reasons, explanations, examples, precedents. But the sovereign simply states, the decision stands and moves forward. The challenger is left to wrestle with silence. And silence is an opponent that never tires, never retreats, never reveals its strategy. Silence after a firm statement is like gravity. It exerts an invisible force that pulls everything toward it. Others rush to fill that silence, and in their rushing, they reveal themselves. They show their insecurities, their desperation for your approval, their need for you to engage with their challenge. But you remain unmoved, like a mountain that doesn't argue with the wind. Picture two men in negotiation. One speaks constantly, explaining his position, justifying his terms, seeking to win through the volume of his words. The other speaks little, states his requirements clearly, then waits. Which man holds the power? Which man gets the better deal? The one who treats silence as his ally, not his enemy. There was a time when a subordinate questioned my judgment before others, seeking to undermine my authority through public debate. Every instinct trained by lesser men urged me to engage, to demonstrate my superior knowledge, to win the argument. Instead, I looked at him for a long moment, then said simply, "I have considered your perspective." Then silence. The conversation died there, but so did his challenge to my authority. The servant believes he must win every argument, convince every doubter, prove his worth to every challenger. But the sovereign understands that engaging with every challenge is beneath his station. Not every question deserves an answer. Not every doubt requires resolution. Not every challenge merits your energy. When you remain silent instead of defending, you force others to confront their own motivations. Why are they challenging you? What do they hope to gain? What insecurity are they trying to resolve through conflict with you? These are questions they must answer for themselves, and they can only do so in the space your silence provides. Speaking less gives others less material to attack, less to deconstruct, less to use against you. Your words become precious because they are rare. Your opinions carry weight because they are not offered freely to every ear. Your position becomes unassailable because it is not constantly available for assault. But remember, this is not the silence of weakness, not the quiet of one who has nothing to say. This is the strategic silence of one who chooses his battles, who values his energy, who understands that authority is not proven through debate but demonstrated through action. The sovereign's silence is more eloquent than the servant's 1,000 words. Learn to wield it, and watch how it transforms not just how others see you, but how you see yourself. Number 7. Invisible war, emotional mastery. The greatest battles are fought not on visible fields but within the fortress of your own mind. Every day, forces assault your emotional walls. Insults that seek to provoke, praise that attempts to manipulate, silences designed to unsettle, words crafted to control. The sovereign who cannot govern his own reactions will never govern anything else. Most men are prisoners of their own emotions, dancing to every stimulus like marionettes controlled by invisible strings. Someone speaks harshly and they respond with anger. Someone offers flattery and they glow with satisfaction. Someone withdraws attention and they scramble for approval. They have confused feeling with responding, experiencing with reacting. But the free man feels everything and responds only when it serves his purpose. His emotions become information, not instructions. Anger tells him something needs attention, but it doesn't command his actions. Fear warns him of potential danger, but it doesn't dictate his choices. Joy alerts him to what brings fulfillment, but it doesn't determine his path. Your mind must become a fortress with carefully guarded gates. Not everyone who approaches deserves entry. Not every emotion that arises demands expression. Not every feeling that stirs requires action. You become the sovereign of your inner kingdom, choosing what influences to accept and what attacks to ignore. Think of a skilled physician examining a patient. He observes symptoms without becoming diseased, diagnoses ailments without adopting them, treats suffering without absorbing it. The emotional master operates with similar detachment. He processes information without being processed by it. I once knew a merchant who could read every fluctuation in market prices, every shift in political wind, every change in public mood, but he could not read his own heart. He made brilliant business decisions but remained a slave to every insult, every slight, every moment of disrespect. His external empire grew while his internal kingdom crumbled. He possessed great wealth but no peace, vast influence but no freedom. The path to emotional mastery begins with the recognition that you are not your feelings. You are the observer of your feelings, the one who experiences them but is not defined by them. When anger arises, you notice its heat but are not burned by it. When sadness appears, you acknowledge its presence but are not drowned by it. When fear emerges, you understand its message but are not paralyzed by it. This doesn't mean becoming cold or unfeeling. The sovereign experiences the full range of human emotion, often more deeply than others, because his feelings are not clouded by reactive desperation. But he experiences them from a position of strength, not vulnerability. He feels from a place of choice, not compulsion. Practice begins with the small moments. The comment that usually triggers your defense mechanism becomes an opportunity to observe your reaction without indulging it. The praise that normally inflates your ego becomes data about what others value, not validation of your worth. The criticism that typically wounds your pride becomes insight into areas for potential growth, not an assault on your identity. True freedom is not the absence of emotional experience. It's the presence of emotional choice. When you can feel without being controlled, experience without being enslaved, observe without being overwhelmed, you have achieved something more valuable than any external treasure. You have become the master of your own inner world, and that mastery is the foundation upon which all other forms of power rest. Number 8, reprogramming identity. The deepest prison is the need to be understood. It makes you perform your life for an audience that will never be satisfied. Explain your choices to judges who have no authority. Seek validation from those whose opinion carries no weight. The sovereign's greatest liberation comes when he eliminates this desperate hunger for comprehension and approval. Most men spend their entire lives trying to justify their existence to others. They shape their words to fit other people's expectations, modify their behaviors to earn acceptance, diminish their ambitions to avoid criticism. They become curators of their own image, constantly editing themselves for an audience that isn't even paying attention. But the sovereign operates from a different identity entirely. He doesn't seek to be understood, he seeks to be effective. He doesn't crave acceptance, he demands respect. He doesn't explain his choices, he lives with their consequences. His identity belongs to him alone, not to the collective opinion of observers. This transformation begins with controlling access to your inner world. Not everyone deserves to know your struggles. Not everyone has earned the right to your explanations. Not everyone merits insight into your process. You become selective about what you share and with whom, understanding that scarcity increases value and mystery enhances authority. When you speak to decide, not to please. Your words serve your purpose, not others' comfort. Your communication becomes strategic rather than reactive, intentional rather than compulsive. You share what serves the situation, not what satisfies others' curiosity. Imagine a master craftsman working in his workshop. Observers may watch his process, but he doesn't modify his technique to make them comfortable. He doesn't explain every tool's purpose or justify every decision. His focus remains on his craft, not on managing spectators' opinions of it. His skill speaks for itself. His results argue his case. There was a period when I felt compelled to explain every decision to my counsel, to justify each choice, to win their understanding before proceeding. But I noticed that the more I explained, the more they questioned. The more I justified, the more they doubted. The more I sought their understanding, the less authority I possessed, so I changed my approach entirely. I began speaking not to convince but to inform, not to seek approval but to provide direction. When they asked why, I learned to say, because this is what we're doing. When they sought justification, I offered only the decision itself. My explanations decreased, but my effectiveness multiplied. This reprogramming requires you to disappoint some people. Those who have grown comfortable with your constant explanations will feel confused by your new clarity. Those who enjoyed unlimited access to your thoughts will feel shut out by your new boundaries. Those who relied on your need for approval will feel lost when that need disappears. But their discomfort is not your responsibility. Their confusion is not your problem. Their loss of unlimited access to you is not your concern. You are not here to manage others' feelings about your growth. You are here to grow. Praise and criticism both become strategic information rather than emotional triggers. Compliments tell you what others value. They don't determine your worth. Insults reveal others' pain points. They don't define your character. Both are simply data to be processed, not verdicts to be internalized. The sovereign's identity is self-generated, self-maintained, and self-directed. He knows who he is independent of others' opinions. He understands his value regardless of others' recognition. He pursues his path without requiring others' permission. This is the ultimate freedom, to exist fully as yourself, answerable only to your own standards, responsible only to your own vision, accountable only to your own conscience. Number 9, rejection as clarity. Rejection is not a wound. It is a gift wrapped in sharp paper. It separates those who recognize your value from those who are blind to it, those who deserve your presence from those who take it for granted, those who understand quality from those who mistake scarcity for worthlessness. The sovereign learns to receive rejection as information, not injury. The servant experiences rejection as a verdict on his worth, a confirmation of his inadequacy, a judgment against his very existence. He takes every no personally, internalizes every dismissal, carries every slight like a stone in his chest. But the sovereign understands rejection differently, as clarity, as direction, as the universe's way of showing him where he doesn't belong and pointing him toward where he does. When someone rejects your offer, your presence, your proposition, they are giving you valuable data. They are showing you their priorities, revealing their capacity for recognition, demonstrating their level of discernment. This information is precious because it saves you from wasting energy on those who cannot appreciate what you offer. Picture a merchant offering pearls in a marketplace. Some customers examine them carefully, recognizing their luster and rarity. Others glance dismissively, seeing only round stones. The merchant doesn't devalue his pearls because some cannot recognize their worth. He simply moves on to those who can. Rejection from the second group is not loss. It's protection from unprofitable relationships. I remember presenting a trade proposal to a neighboring kingdom, an agreement that would have benefited both our peoples enormously. Their king, influenced by advisors who feared losing their own positions, rejected the offer without consideration. My initial impulse was disappointment, even offense. But I recognized this rejection as clarity. They had revealed their inability to recognize opportunity, their susceptibility to poor counsel, their unworthiness as partners. The mistake most men make is responding to rejection with pain, then trying to change the rejector's mind through argument, pleading, or self-diminishment. But the sovereign responds differently. He receives rejection as redirection, absence as strategy, dismissal as discernment. Strategic absence after rejection allows the full weight of your lack to be felt. When you stop pursuing, stop explaining, stop trying to convince, something interesting happens. The space you once occupied becomes noticeable. The value you once offered becomes apparent. The loss of your presence becomes real. But this absence must be paired with silent evolution. You don't disappear to punish, you withdraw to grow. You don't vanish to create drama, you retreat to develop. Your absence becomes productive, not vindictive. When you eventually return, if you choose to return, you come back transformed, not resentful. The sovereign's return, if it comes, speaks louder than any explanation could. Your growth answers questions that arguments never could. Your evolution demonstrates value that words never conveyed. Your transformation proves worth that pleading never established. Some will recognize their mistake and seek to rebuild what they dismissed. Others will remain in their blindness, still unable to see what they lost. Both responses give you clarity about who deserves your energy going forward. But remember, not every door that closes was meant for you to walk through. Not every rejection is a loss to be mourned. Sometimes rejection is protection from situations that would have limited you, relationships that would have drained you, opportunities that would have diminished you. Learn to receive rejection as the universe's quality control system. It filters out those who cannot appreciate your worth, leaving you free to find those who can. It removes incompatible matches, clearing space for aligned connections. It eliminates poor fits, creating room for perfect partnerships. The sovereign who understands rejection as clarity moves through the world with confidence, knowing that every no brings him closer to the right yes. Number 10. Defining standards instead of seeking acceptance. The sovereign does not knock on doors begging to be let in. He builds such an impressive house that others line up requesting entry. He does not lower his standards to fit into existing circles. He establishes standards so compelling that circles form around him. This is the fundamental shift from seeking acceptance to commanding respect. Most men spend their lives as applicants, constantly interviewing for positions in other people's worlds. They modify their personalities to fit group dynamics, compromise their values to gain approval, diminish their standards to avoid being seen as difficult. They become chameleons, changing colors to match whatever environment promises acceptance. But the sovereign operates as the architect of his own environment. He doesn't adapt to existing standards, he creates new ones. He doesn't conform to others' expectations, he establishes expectations that others strive to meet. He doesn't seek to fit in, he becomes someone others aspire to fit in with. This begins with an internal revolution, the decision to stop measuring yourself against others' approval and start measuring others against your principles. Instead of asking, "Will they accept me?" you begin asking, "Do they meet my standards?" Instead of wondering, "Am I good enough for them?" you start evaluating, "Are they worthy of my time and energy?" Think of a master craftsman whose work becomes so renowned that people travel great distances to commission a single piece. He doesn't lower his prices to attract more customers. He raises his standards to attract better ones. He doesn't compromise his technique to speed production. He maintains excellence to preserve reputation. His scarcity increases his value. His selectivity enhances his prestige. I established a practice early in my reign that shocked my courtiers. Instead of seeking audiences with other rulers to gain their favor, I created an environment so prosperous, so just, so wisely governed that they sought audiences with me. Instead of modifying my policies to appease neighboring kingdoms, I governed so effectively that they studied my methods. Instead of compromising my principles to build alliances, I held my standards so high that alliance with me became a mark of distinction. This transformation requires disappointing people who have grown comfortable with your flexibility. Those who enjoyed your willingness to compromise will resist your new firmness. Those who benefited from your low standards will object to your elevated expectations. But their discomfort is the price of your evolution from acceptance seeker to standard setter. Respect is earned through consistency, not through accommodation. When you maintain your standards regardless of pressure to lower them, people begin to understand that your principles are not negotiable, your boundaries are not movable, your values are not subject to popular vote. This consistency becomes your strength, your reliability, your trustworthiness. Kindness without firmness transforms you into a tool rather than a leader. Generosity without boundaries makes you exploitable rather than valuable. Flexibility without limits makes you forgettable rather than memorable. The sovereign learns to balance compassion with strength, openness with selectivity, giving with receiving. When someone disrespects your standards, they disqualify themselves from your inner circle. This is not punishment, it's natural consequences. When someone violates your boundaries, they reveal their character, not yours. When someone fails to meet your expectations, they demonstrate their level, not your standards' unreasonableness. The sovereign creates environments where excellence is expected, where quality is demanded, where standards are maintained. Those who can rise to these expectations flourish in such environments. Those who cannot naturally exclude themselves, saving everyone time and energy. Build your life as a testament to your standards, and you'll discover that the right people will appreciate the craftsmanship, while the wrong people will disqualify themselves through their inability to recognize quality. Number 11. Deliberate scarcity and building the legend. The rarest elements command the highest value. Gold's worth comes not from its beauty alone, but from its scarcity. Diamonds dazzle not merely because they sparkle, but because they are rare. The sovereign understands that his presence, like any precious resource, increases in value as it becomes less available, more selective, more deliberately distributed. Most men make themselves abundant to the point of worthlessness. They are available at every summons, present at every gathering, accessible through every medium of communication. They mistake constant availability for devotion, endless accessibility for generosity, perpetual presence for loyalty. But abundance without selectivity breeds contempt, not appreciation. The sovereign operates by different economics entirely. He understands that scarcity creates desire, that limited access increases perceived value, that strategic absence makes eventual presence more impactful. He becomes deliberately rare, not out of arrogance but out of strategic understanding of human psychology. When you are always available, your availability becomes expected rather than appreciated. When you always say yes, your yes loses its meaning. When you always show up, your presence becomes background noise rather than noteworthy arrival. The sovereign learns to distribute his presence like a master vintner releases wine, carefully, strategically, in quantities that ensure each bottle is treasured. Consider the difference between a street musician who plays on every corner and a legendary performer who gives rare concerts. Both may possess equal talent, but one is ignored while the other commands reverence. The difference lies not in skill but in scarcity, not in ability but in accessibility. I learned this principle through watching how my presence affected different situations. When I attended every council meeting, my voice became just another opinion. When I appeared at every ceremony, my attendance became routine. But when I began choosing my appearances carefully, something transformed. My absence became noticeable. My eventual presence became an event. My words carried weight because they were rarely offered. This scarcity must be paired with constancy of character. You become rare in presence but consistent in principle. You may be less available, but when you are available, you are fully present. You may appear infrequently, but when you appear, you make an impact. Quality replaces quantity, intensity replaces frequency, memorability replaces mere availability. Your memory begins to persist even in your absence. Others mention you in conversations you're not part of. Remember your words from encounters long past. Reference your perspective on matters you haven't discussed with them. You begin to live in other people's minds, occupying space in their thoughts even when you're nowhere near their physical environment. This is how legends are built, not through constant visibility but through unforgettable impact, not through endless presence but through meaningful encounters, not through saying yes to everything but through making your yes carry tremendous weight. The sovereign's calendar becomes sacred territory. Not everyone deserves a place on it. Not every invitation merits acceptance. Not every opportunity requires participation. You become selective about where you invest your time, understanding that time given to one thing is time taken from another. But remember, scarcity without substance is manipulation without merit. Your reduced availability must be backed by increased value when you are available. Your rare presence must be worth the wait. Your limited access must lead to unlimited impact when access is granted. When you master this principle, you no longer compete for attention, you command it. You no longer seek to be remembered, you become impossible to forget. You no longer chase value. You embody it so completely that others chase the privilege of accessing it. Number 12, the final covenant becoming unshakable. This is where your transformation completes itself. In the recognition that rejection is not defeat but redirection, that every door that closes clears the path to the one meant for you, that every person who walks away creates space for those who belong in your life. The unshakable man has moved beyond needing others to validate his worth, because he has learned to generate his own. You have traveled far from the man who once measured his value by others' approval, who once shaped his identity around external expectations, who once treated every criticism as truth and every praise as necessity. That man is gone, not destroyed but transformed, not eliminated but evolved into something far more powerful. The unshakable man possesses strategic silence that speaks louder than desperate words. When others create drama, he responds with calm. When they escalate emotions, he provides stability. When they lose control, he demonstrates mastery. His silence becomes a source of strength, not a sign of weakness. His clarity cuts through confusion like light through darkness. While others waver in uncertainty, he stands firm in his convictions. While they seek consensus, he provides direction. While they ask questions, he offers answers. His certainty becomes a beacon for those lost in the storms of indecision. His wisdom has been earned through experience, tested through challenge, proven through results. He no longer speaks from theory but from practice, no longer offers opinions but shares insights, no longer guesses but knows. His counsel carries weight because his life demonstrates its effectiveness. The unshakable man belongs to no one, and this is precisely what makes him unforgettable. He cannot be bought because his integrity is not for sale. He cannot be controlled because his spirit answers to no master but himself. He cannot be manipulated because his identity comes from within, not from others' recognition. This inner sovereignty transforms everything he touches. His presence elevates conversations. His involvement improves outcomes. His commitment ensures success. People begin to associate him with excellence because excellence follows in his wake. They connect him with reliability because his word becomes his bond. They link him with wisdom because his decisions consistently prove sound. But the greatest transformation is internal. The man who once needed constant validation now generates his own confidence. The man who once feared rejection now uses it as information. The man who once sought approval now commands respect. The man who once begged for his place now creates space for others to earn theirs. He sleeps peacefully because his conscience is clear. He speaks boldly because his words align with his actions. He acts decisively because his judgment has been tested and proven. He lives freely because he has broken every chain that once bound him to others' opinions. This is the inner throne I spoke of from the beginning. Not a physical seat of power, but a state of spiritual sovereignty. Not external authority over others, but internal mastery over yourself. Not the ability to control circumstances, but the wisdom to control your response to them. True wealth has never been measured in gold alone, but in the richness of character, the abundance of wisdom, the treasure of inner peace. The man who rules his own spirit possesses riches that cannot be stolen, authority that cannot be challenged, power that cannot be overthrown. You now hold the keys to this kingdom within yourself. Whether you use them to unlock your potential or let them rust in the prison of old habits is a choice only you can make. There is a moment in every transformation when the old self looks back one final time, seeking permission to return to familiar chains. This is the moment when most men surrender, choosing the comfort of known servitude over the uncertainty of earned freedom. But you have traveled too far to turn back now. The throne within you has been prepared, not through conquest of others, but through mastery of yourself. Every time you chose expansion over contraction, silence over explanation, presence over performance, you were carving away everything that was not truly you. What remains is not a new person, but your authentic self, finally unbound. Picture the oak tree that has weathered 1,000 storms. Its roots have grown deeper with each trial, its trunk more solid with each season. It does not announce its strength to the forest, does not compete with other trees for recognition. It simply stands, magnificent in its certainty, unshakable in its foundation, commanding respect through its very existence. This is what you are becoming, not through force but through presence, not through words but through being, not through seeking but through embodying the very qualities that others spend their lives desperately pursuing in you. The journey of sovereignty never truly ends. It deepens. Each day presents new opportunities to choose your throne over others' approval, your truth over their comfort, your standards over their expectations. If this awakening speaks to something ancient within you, something that recognizes these truths as remembrances rather than discoveries, then join those who walk this path by subscribing, because the deepest transformations happen not in isolation, but in the company of those who understand the weight of inner kingship. Your crown has always been there, waiting. The only question that remains is whether you will finally choose to wear it.